Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to First Church, First Center. Welcome to our Power Within class. I've been working with this material this week, and I've determined to actually do this class. It will take a little bit longer than the allotted 6 weeks, but we'll get through as much of it as we can. And then we might have a break, and then I'll possibly do a couple other sessions afterwards, because the more we try to compress it, the more challenging it gets. So I wanted everybody in this class to be able to relax, because it's an overview of our teaching by one of the great teachers who was Frederick Bales. And we're also using Ernest Holmes material from the textbook itself and other supplemental information. So I'm hoping everybody here is doing well this evening, and I'm knowing all is well, because we are science of mind people, and it is our practice to understand and know that all is well, even when things don't necessarily appear to be perfect. We know that there is this creative intelligence that's in us, and that operates through us, and that corrects and inspires and nurtures and moves us all along. This chapter this evening is about, again, focus. And some of it, as I was going through it, sounds redundant. But one thing I've learned about the teaching over the years is we all need so much reminding of some of these things, because we have, many of us, this built-in propensity to forget. Forget that we're wonderful, and forget that we exist as power and potential. And so we want to bring the positive things about ourselves to the forefront, and we want to accept them in a deeper way. And we want to have we really want to have all of that positive thought start to take shape on the material side of life, where it really starts to show up. So we engage in a practice, and we will begin. Jimmy, I'm going to need some water eventually. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things we mentioned before. From Louise Hay, and Mr. Bales is saying the same thing, only in different words. Never belittle yourself. Sounds simple enough, right? But we belittle ourselves in 1,000 different ways. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Louise Hay would say many years later, never, never, never criticize yourself. And I remember hearing that when I was younger, and I thought, yeah, I beat myself up to death. I think that I don't do well enough. You can think of everything you've ever done wrong, and people have a tendency sometimes to do that. So that's something we definitely want to be aware of. And these are some of the things we're going to address tonight, but I'm just highlighting a few of them now. There was a suggestion for this course that he said, act out the part of the person you most want to be. So in your heart of heart, your inspired mind, who would I love to be if I could be anybody? And how would I want to show up? And so the suggestion is, contemplate that a little bit and act that out. Next suggestion, and this is all tied into us checking out our mental attitudes. And for those of you, any of you who are involved in 12-step programs, 12-step programs, by the way, are wonderful because they have several inventories. They have a daily inventory, which I believe is the 10th step. And they have a 4th step inventory, which is a thorough inventory. And there's different places. And so to borrow from that, we want to take a look at our mental attitudes, never from the construct or the idea to beat ourselves up or to put ourselves down, but if we keep on operating with some old pattern that keeps on going on and on and on for some cases 20, 30, 40 years, it will keep creating the same type of outcome. The places will change, the people will change, The faces will change, but if there's a pattern beneath or underneath that's I'm not okay, I'm not good enough, and somehow if that is the pattern that's, I'll call it looping around like an old tape, that pattern has a way of showing up over and over and over again. So part of this lesson is going to suggest energetically in our mind and our thoughts to turn away from past failures wherever and however they come to your mind. Wherever you, in your own estimation, have thought not good enough or I failed. Could be a marriage, could be a relationship, it could be a job, or it could be any place where you were less than perfect. And the thing is, we're learning to have compassion for ourselves here because who among us have been perfect always? I mean, honestly. And all of us are really, I should say, most of us are pretty good at nurturing other people. But we're really somewhat not, I shouldn't say we're lousy, but there's a lot of us who are not very good at nurturing ourselves. Again, there's a reason someone like Louise Hay, had 100 million people reading her book. It's all about learning to appreciate and love yourself. So in our life, as we do our inventories and ideas of failures come up, you really want to find a way to relanguage that, rethink it, because nothing ever in the truest sense was a failure. Everything's always been a learning thing for you. The things that have been the hardest probably have taught you the most. Then in terms of mental attitudes, the suggestion for Mr. Bales, which I'm going to go into his actual words, but since I've been through the course 3 or 4 times, the suggestion is turning away from the past failures, and then he really is suggesting that you turn to your life. It could be from the time you were in kindergarten through middle school, you first got married or first got involved, or whatever your romances have been, your relationships with your family, whatever you've done in your work or your volunteer world. Think in terms of any kind of success that you've ever had in anything. However small you might think, it doesn't matter, because if you can start remembering the good things, and we've all had good things, and bring that into your collective, I shouldn't say your collective, your individual memory, that will help you build up a success pattern within you, because most people have a tendency to remember the problems. And they forget the places where, really wonderful things happen. So tonight's lesson will have a little bit of that in it too. And you'll probably hear me say it again because I'm giving you the preview. And then there's the whole thing about compensation and the law of compensation and how life will it really reflect to us what we ask for. And here comes a PowerPoint statement. Your power, your creativity always flows to the focus of your attention. So if you tend to be a very positive person generally, and you're focused in different areas, you're directing, you have a lot of power at your disposal. If you're scattered, that scattered focus, like you're everywhere, it's not quite as powerful. Power flows to the focus point of your attention. We're going to talk a little bit also about the law of attraction, which everyone seems to think that they know about, and you do generally. But, it's not wishcraft. We really have to do something to fine-tune that attracting ability that we all have. Mr. Bales, Dr. Bales said, our mind is of the one mind. So if you walk away from nothing else, if this is your first exposure to the teaching, we're exposing you to the idea that there's one energy, there's one intelligence, there's one creative mind, there's one source, one God, and you can language it, probably in unlimited ways, but it'll come back to a central idea, that our mind is connected with this one mind, that we are an inlet and outlet of it. It's inescapable. You're part of it. So the very thing that animates you is this is this great intelligence, this love, which is known by many names. And because of that, there is a knower that is within us. You can always turn to the Spirit within, or the Father within. In fact, that's always the invitation. What happens is people get away from it, and they forget that they are one with the One. So this class serves to remind everyone that there is that which is within you that knows, or the way Frederick Bales said it, there is a knower within each and every one of us. And the next point was infinite creativity will invest itself in your thought, because it's what it does. It responds to, it absolutely has to. It's what it does. The Science of Mind, taught by Ernest Holmes, Frederick Bales, and just about everyone else. The Science of Mind is a way of life. And now we want to look at our habits a little bit in this study, because our habits, we do things sometimes without thought. We might have had thoughts about them originally, but so much of what we do now, we do automatically. And many of these habits that we have, they don't serve us. So we're going to look, as we examine ourselves, we're also going to be paying attention to what we think, what we say, the things we do. In this lesson, again, we're going to talk about the focus of our attention and why our power flows to this area of focus. The first two lessons dealt quite a bit with the basic mental attitudes underlying how to treat for specific results. In this class, again, we're going to emphasize and expand on those fundamentals. And I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again because it's really important. Never say a thing about yourself that you do not want to see realized in your life. You see, your word is your wand. You have tremendous power. Never say a thing about yourself that you don't want realized to see in your life. So maybe you won't consciously, maybe you won't in the world say terrible things about yourself. I mean, people have like their secrets and stuff. But whatever it is, that thing. I used to have a student years ago. She was involved in a bad relationship, and she thought of herself as her phrase was a dirty little secret. And I remember saying to her, I said, geez, you got to find a different way to language that. I mean, you might not like what you've done or what you're doing, and somehow or another, you got to bring yourself to a point where you can forgive yourself for what's happened the past couple years. You have to find somehow, some way within your own being to love, accept, and approve of yourself. Because all of these belittling statements that the word is ruminate, that go over and over inside of you, I mean, nobody knows, right? But you know. And the thing about you knowing this stuff that you're saying to yourself, it's just really horrible because the universe responds to your own assessment of yourself. So that was one example without getting into all the details. And eventually, this person who was involved in something that she thought was beneath herself, she eventually stepped out of it. And she realized, hell, I deserve something better than this. I deserve to have a relationship with somebody that loves me and appreciates me. And, so most of us have things within us that they're tied into things like shame and blame, and it's part of that inner dialogue that every Thursday night I ask in the self-healing class. I'll say, what's it been like being you this week? And I'm never ever trying to get anybody to spill the beans because I really don't. I have enough of my own stuff to work through, but we all have stuff. And if we really want to elevate our life and our consciousness and our life experience, those are those inner discussions and thoughts that you want to bring to light. There was an author that I used to be fond of who wrote some book. She was in the recovery industry. She said, all our battered places need to be brought to light. Doesn't mean you need to write a book about it or you need to share it with everybody in the world. But the thing is, the parts of you or the things inside of you that are shameful or you feel bad about, you dwell on, that stuff gets in the way. If you're attempting to live this spiritual life, this metaphysical existence where everything can be open to you, where you can see tremendous beauty and prosperity and experience love, the things that'll hold you back are the things that are within you that you just don't want to look at, you're afraid to look at, you don't know where to begin to look at. And that's where Louise Hay came in and said, it's a bit like cleaning a house that's a mess. You begin just in this corner of this room, and you do that with your thinking too. And as you begin to change your thinking, then your life will start to change. It will seem like magic. It might have taken you 20, 30 years to be in the position you're in or longer, but you'd be amazed with a few months of practice. You'll be amazed before you're halfway through. So again, you might say, "Oh, Greg's repeating himself," because I'm really talking about the class I'm about to teach. But as long as you get the message one way or another, it's not so important. Never say a thing about yourself that you don't want to see realized in your life. And if you're sitting there alone at night and you're kind of like ruminating with these negatives, find the way within yourself to stop. Get up, move around, change the channel. Find a way to say stop, or next, or cancel. I can give you lots of little intervening things to do. But the point is you stop it and then you neutralize it and you begin to tell yourself something much different and tell yourself how wonderful you are and start to see you as God sees you, or start to see you as the universe would understand you to be. Because really, if you start to get this teaching, you were united with all the beauty and love and intelligence of the universe. That is who you are. That is your true nature. And that's what you want to wake up to. Frederick Bales, a couple times in the coursework, was talking about setting a watch upon your own lips. I think I mentioned that last week. We refer now to, he's basically finding a way for us to stop talking the negativity. We refer now to the very common practice of belittling ourselves, he said, where we belittle our talents, we will belittle our abilities, we'll defer to our husband, our boss, we'll belittle our achievements, where we've become accustomed to playing small and being very deferential. And there's nothing wrong with having some humility, but the other side of the coin, if you take that to extreme, where you're kind of like thinking nothing you do has any value, that's a mistake. And if you're always going around apologizing or minimizing your strong points, you want to maybe stop doing that. And he said, or you could go the other way. You sometimes tend to blow up your weak points. You're always talking to people about the things you can't do, and you'll exaggerate how bad it is. He says none of this is good. A little bit of this could be due to modesty, but the larger proportion actually grows out of a general sense of inferiority, and it's done for the purpose, oftentimes, of having someone else come in to bolster your morale. So please don't be looking for other people to build you up. That's really our own job. If you're not feeling good enough and you go to the Louise Hay material, Louise Hay would directly ask you, by whose standards are you judging yourself? Where you're always, no, I don't feel smart enough, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not that. And she asked that question in one of her workshops. Where do these standards come from, where you judge yourself so harshly? And in most cases, it goes back to our childhood, but it's also things that we have carried with us, and then we extend now to our own friends and our own, it could be employees, it could be our children, and all of that. So we want to really start to get a handle on that. The person who's so critical or doesn't feel good enough, usually crave reassurance, and they seek ways of finding it or having it given to them. It's not easy to get into the center of a problem and immediately build an awareness of our own worth. But we can approach it by practicing a procedure that would be quite natural for us if we already had the inner consciousness of our true worth. So Bales is suggesting that we act as if. Act out the part of the person you'd like to be. So, there's where some visioning can help, or some meditation can help, or journaling. Imagine yourself as being wildly happy and successful and doing things without limits, right? We spoke recently of a person who started diving in their 80s and different things. Act, the things that you maybe have put a lid on that you've forgotten you could do, or your talents. So act out that person as though you are that person that you want to be. And if you think back, there's things that probably you would have liked to try to do that you haven't done. So let your creative imagination work with that a little bit. He said we can decide what sort of person we would like to be, and we can begin at once to act that part. I remember distinctly a story my mother told me when she moved to Florida, and she was in her early 50s. And she was living in New England, and she was somebody. And all of a sudden, she was in Florida, and it was really bothering her wherever she and my father went out to eat, where the service was terrible. And she just always felt like she was being ignored. And it started to bother her. My father would say, your mother's like really upset. And I remember tuning in on that subject with her a year or two later. And she said to me, I just made a decision one day that I'm done complaining about whatever was happening in these restaurants that used to bother her. Now, you might think that's not anything major. But the thing is, it's those small things like that, because she lived in Florida another 20 some odd years and no more problems, no more complaints. It's as simple as that if you do it across the board. Wherever you're finding yourself complaining, you just, you could keep doing that. I have a friend that I speak to often, and often I'm sure the person doesn't know aware of it. She's not aware of it, but it's usually all about complaints. And all I can say is, that doesn't pay off. It doesn't work to your advantage. So when we're in this teaching, we really want to find a way to turn that around, because you're not necessarily going to turn the circumstances around, but you can definitely have a different experience if you turn the way you look about it around. Whatever we're doing here, Dr. Bales was saying, things are going to come out in your life. He says, one who does this usually finds that they come to think within themselves what they want to think. So what he's really saying is, if you can imagine yourself as being successful and happy, or you can imagine yourself as being a magnet for friends and all that, if you can really start to think of yourself differently, it will have a tendency to show up. He said, we are, however, under no circumstance trying to act the part with the intention of impressing anybody, because we're not doing this to impress anybody. What other people at this stage of the game think about us is not terribly important to us. It shouldn't be at this point in our lives, because most of us here, we're mature, and we're here and we want to experience a better quality of living. So you're not doing it to impress a soul. And he said, you can go through life fooling all kinds of people, but you can never fool yourself. In this teaching, we're dealing with ourselves, and we're always dealing with what's happening right now. And we must deal honestly. So if we got stuff that's bothering us, we really want to find a way to neutralize what's bothering us and replace what's bothering us with ideas of truth. So what we think about ourselves is the main thing. It's the chief thing. It's the thing that causes the problem. It's also the thing that brings the solution. What we think about ourselves. Ernest Holmes said we have executive power. See, the subconscious has all the power to bring things forward, but it's your conscious mind is where you find your executive power. You might have to use your executive power over and over again. I might have to affirm something. I might have to keep affirming it. And when something comes up that's seems to be working against me, which will represent some habitual thought or thinking, then I really have to start using my conscious mind. That's my executive mind. That's the part that, when they teach this to the children, they think of a stagecoach. And we can be in that stagecoach. It's our unconscious, our comfort zone. The invitation is, you teach the children in Science of Mind to step out of the stagecoach and get up on the platform. And there's reins there. Take the reins. In front of you are wild stallions representing all the power in the world. But you're not going to go anywhere until you start to utilize the power that you have. So you need to pick up the reins and start using your own God-given thoughts. Otherwise, you will retreat into what's comfortable, representing the stagecoach. And then those horses, which represent power, will take you everywhere, but you're not directing the power. So what we're attempting to do here is to learn how to direct this creative, this vast power that we have is ours to use. And we can use it intelligently. So Ernest Holmes said there's power for the good in the universe and you can use it. And that's what he was talking about. So we want to deal with ourselves honestly. What we think of ourselves is really important. So you want to really unearth that stuff that you might be ugly. I'm thinking of Lady Gaga of all people now. You got to love yourself. You got to love the ugly. You got to love the whole thing. You were born this way. So whatever it is that's in you, that's operating through you, we don't want to be in denial about it. All our battered places, really they need to come to light so you can deal with them. Because if you suppress them and you pretend they're not there, but they're there on some level, then they have a tendency to reappear again and again. There's an old adage from a minister I used to know. She would say, same song, different verse, a little bit louder and a little bit worse. And what she was talking about always is this thing. We keep bringing things into our lives and we act surprised. But on some level, you're not really surprised because you know that you have patterns of thought within you that you really have not yet addressed, you've not yet neutralized or replaced. So there's the value of tuning in every Thursday night. That's the value of a class like this, is because you can move through anything. You can move through mountains. You can heal your life. You can heal. You're unlimited, and you have unlimited power at your disposal. So what we think of ourselves is the primary thing. If it sometimes happens, and it will, because we're all human beings, where things crop up, and you think, oh my God, I thought I dealt with this before, right? And here it is again. Hello, my friend. I'm thinking of Simon Garfunkel. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. Stuff comes up, and you think you've dealt with it, and you have dealt with it to an extent. But, we want to be vigilant because we need to become the guardian at the gate of our own being, our own consciousness. And for the love of God, if something comes up, please don't use that as an excuse to beat yourself up, but just do what we do. Look at it, neutralize it, say I release the need for it, and replace, feel what you need to feel, right? And then replace the negative pattern that, you have apparently not yet totally eradicated, and we work on it. So Frederick Bale says we must, in this process, instantly make up our minds and say to ourselves, I will never voice it again. So he wants you to do it with passion, in other words. He says, if you do it with some passion, you're going to stop the drift toward the negative. We must never forget the power of the spoken word. See, when I came to New York, everyone was talking about the spoken word, and I certainly had heard about it before. Frederick Bale says it's because the power of the spoken word is far greater than we imagine. And I would add, well, that will also include then our fears, our quiet fears, and our faulty thinking. And it's true, because it isn't just what comes out of our mouth, it's also what ruminates. When you're home alone at night and you're fearful of your health, you're fearful of your children, and you're worried about your finances, and you're worried about everything, all of that stuff is powerful thinking, right? And it's faulty thinking because you are united with God and you have limitless resources, but you're on this loop of thought that is very, very creative. So we want to be careful about what we say. And he's thinking then, he's giving an example and a quote. If a person says, I don't have a personality, I'm such and such age, I'm not attractive, I never was attractive, or I'm not attractive now. He says the person who says this is giving themselves a treatment from the negative side, which will tend to make them unattractive. He says you're always dealing with a law. He says, and be careful what comes out of your mind, out of your mouth, he says first, and then out of your mind, right? To say, I'm never going to hold a job, I'm never going to be able to do this, be real careful about saying I will never and I can't, wherever you start making these grand statements. He says, because when you make these statements, especially the negative ones, a current of energy, you're putting a current of energy in motion that will continue to have you lose whatever it is that you say you're losing. Be it your hair or your friendships or your jobs or anything else. He said, if you're somebody who's always saying, I always get the bad breaks, or I always do the wrong thing at the right time, he says, these are really horrible things to be saying to yourself. And he says, all these kinds of expressions gain terrific force once they're put into words. They have force even if you're thinking of them, but when you start speaking of them out in the world, especially if they're repeated, over and over again, there's a reason for this. Today is the finished product of the thoughts you had yesterday and last week, last year. Today's thought, even now, is passing through what he called the loom of your mind, and today's thought will become the pattern of tomorrow or next month's experience. So I like to think of like these classes that we attend on Thursday and Sunday, and this class, it's like, okay, I'm investing in an insurance policy here. Doesn't cost very much. But the thing is, putting my time and attention here and just reminding myself of these things is such a huge investment, because I need a lot of reminders. I used to teach the same material to teenagers in a treatment center years ago. And they said, well, you're trying to brainwash us. I said, no, not at all. I'm just trying to remind you of how wonderful and great you are. And you have a propensity to keep on thinking you're worthless. And I promise you, if you keep on thinking you're worthless and your life isn't worth anything, you're going to get yourself in a whole lot of trouble. And you don't have to do it that way. There's an old adage from other programs, misery is optional. Ernest Holmes said, suffering is not God ordained. Okay, so you were born to be free, right? So what's all this suffering about? That was Ernest Holmes. Suffering is not God ordained. So if we suffer, it's because of the thoughts that we think. If we suffer, it's because we ruminate on false ideas. It was Ralph Waldo Emerson who so beautifully stated, the finite, that'd be like you and I in our daily concerns. Emerson said, the finite alone has wrought and suffered, while the infinite lays back in smiling repose. So we could be down here like killing each other and doing whatever we do, and God doesn't intervene in that way. Everything's up to us. So if we suffer because of our particular attachments. We want things to be the way we want things to be. And we try to manipulate everything in order to get things we want. And the universe clearly does not work that way. It doesn't answer prayers and petitions that are rescue missions. What this teaching calls for us is for us to align ourselves with the laws of life, to wake up to the fact that you are one with this intelligence, you are one with this energy. And as you learn how to align yourself with it, it will respond to you. Your life will take on you'll be like on a fast track, because basically you're evolving and you're not so much about trying to manipulate anything. You're communing with the one life. You're learning to live the affirmative life. You're becoming free, as Ernest Holmes said, of the bondage of self. So, that comes through meditation, that comes through spiritual mind treatment. You lay things down. You're not interested in the fight anymore. You're not interested in arguing with everybody. You don't have a need to be right. You'll enter into a spiritual dimension where you'll understand that all the things that are happening are fine. All the world is unfolding in divine order, and that's good too. And you get to start to put your time and attention on things that are really worthy of you. There's the old story, not that I quote Jesus very often, but the story where his mother was wanting him to do something for her. I can't remember what it was. And he was at a point where he was becoming a young man, and he said to his mother, I need to be about my father's business. I need to put my time and attention towards something else. And all of us who are in this teaching, really we're at a turning point in that sense. Our life has moved along. We don't really focus on age and stuff, but the thing is, we've been out there in the weeds, and there's going to be people around you that are going to live their life at the effect of everything all the time. But as you enter in this teaching, you're entering into a different type of mind, where you're going to realize, okay, I'm one with this creative intelligence. I have power to use. I can use it more intelligently if I want to. I can release the need to be involved in all the stuff that's going on out there. I don't have to be traumatized by the news. I don't need to be traumatized by inflation. I don't need to be traumatized by politics. I don't need to get drawn into all of this stuff that most of humanity gets drawn into. I choose to live my life as a spiritualized being, and I choose to see the good that's unfolding in me and everyone else. So Bales next gets into, if we have not yet advanced to the point where we have thorough control over our thoughts, we can at least, to a large degree, control our speech. Therefore, today I refuse to give utterance to that which we now know will only perpetuate our unwanted past experiences. And the next thing he said, which I think is kind of brilliant, he says, turn away from your past failures. Just refuse to talk about it anymore. The person who reaches backward to keep stressing the points which they made mistakes, or they lost a fortune, or they lost the love of their life, or they made the wrong choice, if you keep going back to what it was like at a different time, you're just putting yourself through hell. I came here in New York in 2017 when this church was literally had no people anymore. And all I would hear was what it used to be like. And the thing is, that's not helpful, because the people are gone. The teaching is still the teaching, but it's a new moment, and people are learning to engage with the teaching in a fresh way. And now we're doing hybrid classes, and we're reaching out to people all over the country, and our message is growing. But it's not growing because we're doing everything the way it was done 20, 30 years ago. I would be sure if Raymond Charles Barker were here today, or Stuart Dr. Grayson, that they would be on the forefront of all of it and attempting to be present for what's going on in 2022. All of us are challenged with this. We're challenged with being present in the year 2022, or the 2020s, as we're entering this decade. If we keep looking backward to where we have made mistakes, where we have made wrong choices, where we have failed. If that is our reference point, God help us, because we just keep on perpetuating the same type of thing. So he went on to say, if you keep doing that, you're putting negative things into the forefront of your consciousness always, instead of appreciating. You probably have new, beautiful people in your life right now. You might have people that really are interested in you and think you're wonderful. And they could be, I don't know, half your age. They're going to be different than what they were before. And somehow that's not enough for some reason. You know, the mind goes to what used to be. That's the stuff you want to be careful of. And we want to develop the ability to see the good in the friendships that are developing. You know, any good friendship that you ever had started someplace. And so there's people in your lives right now that, you know, probably are very wonderful if you allow yourself to give these relationships a chance and release the need to look backward in all these areas. So, as we go forward, Bales reminds us that it's done unto us always as we believe. If we believe that we have made blunders yesterday or in the past, then it follows that we will make blunders tomorrow. So somehow, some way, we want to bring ourselves to a point where we can release the need to criticize ourselves and accept where we've been and understand always that you have done the best you could with the information, understanding, and awareness that you had. So otherwise, you're going to just keep on expressing your belief that you are insufficient and that you make blunders and you make mistakes and that you're not good enough. And that will be a pattern that will continue to operate. If we believe that if we believe people were not attracted to us yesterday, then we will believe that they will not be attracted to us today or tomorrow. And so it is with every single negative belief. I did a talk by Raymond Charles Barker Sunday, which was called Unfinished Business. And he says, I get up every day after I take my shower, and he's there in his shorts or his towel, and he says, Raymond, you're wonderful. And he says, he's considering his age, and he was probably my age at this point, and he's saying, all things considered, you're really great. You know, and he developed that conversation, you know, if you have this sense that you're not okay and you're not likable and lovable and not attractive, he says, my goodness, you're just creating this whole world where your life is working against you. Our author in this class says this is why the student, from now on, he uses the word should, which, you know, I don't like. He said, this is why the student from now on should speak only of those things that he or she wants to see realized in their lives. Turn to your past successes, no matter how inconsequential you think they were. Could be a little girl when you're like doing a baking contest, or you're building a fort, or it could be a quiz you're having. It could be maybe you were interested in dogs, or I'm trying to think what kids are interested in. I used to like trains, or whatever it is, whatever you made, whatever you put together at any point in your life, no matter if you're 5 years old or you're 15 or you're 14 or whatever. I'm trying to think. My sisters liked horses. I used to work at a vet's place, and I helped I didn't give birth, but helped when these racehorses were giving birth. You know, there's a lot of things I did that was helpful. Focus on your successes, all of them, where you won something, or where you got an appreciation or a notice, you know, from maybe an aunt or a grandmother. Whatever it was where you were acknowledged, remember that positive feeling and bring that into your memory. You should almost think about putting that into, like, you know how we talk about gratitude lists? Wherever you have had any success. I was thinking about this lesson. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I was training a new staff. My father's office, they were all like new, and I was teaching them how to sell and how to closing techniques. And I'm watching my father beaming with pride as I was teaching this whole group of people, and I think I was doing it better than he could, and he was very proud of me. whatever awards I might have won in my life, whatever recognition I ever got, bring that stuff into your mind, because that's going to cause you to remember, the successes that you've had. And no one else is going to remember them at this stage of the game except for you, right? But they're important for you to remember. As I was contemplating this, there was a time in my life where I was working with the Louise hay material in an AIDS agency, and all of the people that I was dealing with for 2 years were women and or their children who had AIDS. And there were a lot of sick kids, and there were a lot of deaths that I was there. And I remember being bedside with many, many people. And I know those moments were really wonderful and exceptional. And I can remember those moments, and those stand out as things that, you've all done stuff like that with your own families, your parents and your grandparents. All of those things are big successes in your life. So Bills is asking you to remember how great you have been in your own life. Because what happens is people have this, they remember everything that's wrong, and they don't remember where they have been fantastic. So it helped me a lot just as I was preparing the lesson. I thought, oh yeah. I also remember another instance where somebody who had AIDS, and it was a 2.5-year endeavor. And I know there's some members in our church right now who are taking care of people who are dealing with Alzheimer's and other things. And it really, you give all your best in those situations. And every one of us have done things that have been exceptional. And so what Frederick Bales is suggesting here is write that down. Write that down. And like in the center, I came into this building in 2017, and the place was falling apart. It was filled with code violations, and we never should have bought this building when we bought it. There was no inspections. It was completely a disaster. And during the past 3 or 4 years, we've fixed every code violation, and we did it through COVID, and we kept things going, and no one knows the work that was done. But the thing is, I know the work that was done. And that's the type of thing that, all of you have had lives where you've done so much. And so write that down, and you can really have a sense of pride for what you've done. Equally important is having a little bit of a gratitude list, because we will all have days where things seem, it's just one of those days. And if you can draw on a list, and have yourself read it, it will really help you a lot. So keeping your thoughts up, Frederick Bales said, is your responsibility. And refusing to take things personally is such a great thing to add to this class. And we got that, of course, through the 4 agreements. Bales says, keep your thoughts up. That's your responsibility. From the 4 agreements, we have the big challenge, which is refuse to take things personally, because you got to understand that people are not really out to get anybody. The people are operating with their level of understanding. If you ever become a minister, you'll see the things that'll get thrown in your direction. And what you're always challenged to do is understand that they're doing the best that they can with the information they have, which is usually about 50% of the truth. So everyone's doing the best they can with the information, the understanding, and the awareness that they have. I'll add another line from the Course in Miracles, which I think is appropriate here to this discussion. It's been informing me for many years. It's the quote, "I am not a victim of the world I see." So please let yourself step out of that role. If you're in it anywhere, if you find yourself in that role, where you're seeing it yourself as less than or not supplied and supported, the only one that can pull you out of that line of thinking and expression is you. So I remember that often. I am not a victim of the world I see. Bill Tolliver taught me, when he was teaching me the very same material years ago, that you get to be a lifter in life, if you want to be, or you get to be a leaner. And he said, which would you rather be? Would you rather be the one who's strong in terms of your spiritualized thought, where you're seeing the God in the good? And if so, you lift yourself up and you lift up life. Or would you rather be the one who's always the drag? Always the one who's the doubting and always the one who's the pessimist. And that ties in directly, you might recall Henry Pascal, it was Pascal's wager. Which way do you want to live your life? You can do it either way. You can keep on living life as seeing it as good and filled with goodness, in which case your rewards will be open and everywhere. Or you can keep on doing it like the other way, full of fear and questioning and trepidation. And then because of the power of your thought, then you're going to experience a life filled with fear, and because it'll be a demonstration of your own thinking. Next question for this class is, how can I be sane and happy? And from an old song, in a world that's constantly changing. And that's a great question. That is your task. If you want to live the affirmative life, if you really want to live the affirmative life, your job is to step out of the roles of seeing yourself as being a victim of anything. You want to step out of the role of victim, and you want to get to the place where you understand life is getting better and better because you're starting to take charge of yourself. You're starting to use your executive power. If you think of the stagecoach that we teach the children, you're getting out of your comfort zones. You're not thinking of yourself as a victim. Melanie Beatty's great book, Codependent No More, you're stepping out of the place where you're depending upon what this person or that person says, and you realize, I am the author of my own experience. I am the person who gets to decide. I am not a victim of the world I see. I am the decider in my own life. So you're going to release the need to give your power away to people, places, and things. All of us have this power, and Frederick Bale's great invitation is for us to start using it more consciously. Because otherwise, life is responding to you anyway. Life responds to you when you're thinking destructively, life is responding to you. When you're thinking constructively, life is also responding to you. So which way would you like to have it work? If you know that you have the ability to shape it by aligning with it, so the aspects of life, according to Judge Troward, peace, power, love, joy, beauty, and wisdom. So if you want to align yourself with what life is, then you want to align your thinking with ideas like peace, power, wholeness, joy, beauty, and let that shape your consciousness and start living the affirmative life, which would mean begin practicing seeing the good about yourself first and foremost, and then about life itself. You want to build a positive mentality. That's the number one thing. It's the number one issue. It's what Bales calls the primary thing, is to build a positive mentality. If you challenge yourself, you will also remember the times when you made the right decisions, or when someone showed up who likes your company, who liked your company, where you had the good breaks, where you had, I already asked you to do that a few minutes ago, where you remember the good things. It might be important even to write them down, because I don't recall all that stuff until I started doing it just today and yesterday. I thought, oh my God, yeah, great. I was a class president. There's lots of things to be proud of, but I haven't thought about those things in 40 years. Put that stuff together, because I know you can go to the negative in 2 seconds if you want to. So let's have a little positive list there that you can go to as well. And Frederick Bale said, this is a positive use of your memory. You might think of times when you showed up positively in any kind of contest. I don't care what it was, right? It could be building sandcastles. It doesn't matter. But remembering the positive things is just such a good thing for you to do for yourself. You might even recall where someone gave you a sincere compliment, because people don't compliment a lot. I don't know what it is, but remember the ones that you got and have that in your little place where you remember things. And he says, we want to be careful not to be boastful or boring. We may even speak, he says, sometimes we don't want to speak of our achievements, but it's important. So he wants us to call into mind every compliment that was ever given to us. And I did this, and I can remember I had an aunt who lived in the village in New York, and I was like 13, and she was like my great champion, more so than even my parents. And I started thinking of her as I was doing this material. The gifts that I got from these people were tremendous, but I forget them. So now I'm starting to challenge myself to remember. And after you do this, Dr. Bill says, then I want you to ask the student to make a decision. And again, you've already heard it. And so I'm extending his question to you. I'm asking you to make the decision that he's asked of his classes. To say to yourself, I will never say a thing about myself that I don't want to see realized in my life. So I'm going to really make an effort. This one decision will change the life of thousands. He says, please understand, life pays us what we ask. Life is never really unfair to anybody. So the big decision is for you to say to yourself, I will never say a thing about myself that I don't want to see realized in my life. So he's asking you to make a bigger commitment to yourself and understanding the power of your words and your thoughts. He said, life's not unfair to us. We are unfair to ourselves. Now, I can think of all the accomplishments that we made in this church since 2017. They've been unbelievable. We got closed out of a place due to COVID, and fortunately, that saved us $70,000. We had an illegal third floor here, which was supposed to be an apartment, and we put an apartment up there that saved us another $60,000. We got our property taxes reduced by $65,000. We've cleared out the whole building. We've done a tremendous amount of work. And it's not like there ever was a plan. It's just you do the next right thing. You do the next smart thing. And you rely on your own inner gifts and, spirit which guides. We're always at choice. So life is not unfair to us, right? So we got to understand, I'm not a victim of the world we see. We are unfair to ourselves. We tend to be critical of others. We tend to be critical of everything. So we're always at choice. And he said, we may offer ourselves in the bargain basement, or we may see ourselves in the exclusive section of life. And life is very willing to pay. It doesn't have any alternative. It's happy to pay the price that we value ourselves upon. It can pay no more, no less. If you keep on thinking that you're not worth good things, good people, good friendships, and then it tends to replicate in your life exactly what's placed before it. So it operates impersonally. He says, as the loom, it will weave into the cloth the threads that you give it. And if you're using cheap white cotton or costly threads of silk, it doesn't make any difference to life. Here's a poem I thought I already read, but if not, I'll give it again. It's an old poem by Jesse Rittenhouse. I do think some of his material shows up in different forms in each of his lessons. But the poem is, I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more. However, I begged at evening, when I counted my scanty store, for life, he said, is a just employer. It gives you what you ask. But once you have set your wages, why, then you must bear the task. He said, I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn, dismayed, that any wage I had asked of life would have gladly paid. So we can't make it about the other guy. We can't make it about our husbands, our girlfriends, our boyfriends. We can't make it about the U.S. economy. We can't make it about anything. We really have to No, you don't have to do anything. But the invitation in this teaching is for you to realize that you are cause to your own experience. So you have a huge opportunity to create a kind of life that you want. Or you could just do it the other way, which is believe ain't it awful and poor me, and then, just see it start to shape up. But if you're on this call, I already know that most of you are at a point of decision. Reminds me of Raymond Charles Barker's book, The Power of Decision. So you're at a point where you're willing to engage it. And as you engage it, it will respond to you. When we come to see this life no longer as harsh and cruel, our world changes as our ideas concerning ourselves change. There, again, is a reason Louise Hay's book circled the globe like no other book ever has, because she tapped into this whole thing. It's all about people feeling that they're undeserving and not enough. And once you start to raise that whole vibration, that thought to a much higher place and realize that you are one with the very essence of life and it responds to you, you won't be so hesitant to think you won't think poorly of yourself anymore. And just the opposite, you're going to begin thinking higher and higher of yourself and your own value. This process implies, Dr. Bill said, in making ourselves more valuable. It's just as you begin to think differently. I have to check for time. Okay, we have a little bit more time. Dr. Bale says, we may fool our employer, we can never fool the law. We can't be avoiding our rightful responsibilities. Therefore, spirit, mind, the universe will give us what we most deeply want. If you're trying to avoid all your responsibilities, you're going to have a life devoid of responsibility. But you'll also miss out on all the great rewards. Life's biggest rewards are coupled with the biggest responsibilities. So we don't want to avoid responsibilities, because if we're avoiding responsibilities, we're avoiding rewards. Once again, power flows to the focus of our attention. It might be well at this point to consider the difficulty of constantly maintaining positive attitudes. As human beings, we're subject to the limitations of our common humanity. We find that in spite of our earnest desire to maintain the highest level of thinking, negative thoughts creep in from time to time. And when the untutored, which could be many of us, find an old pattern showing up from time to time, sometimes they're likely to abandon their efforts in disgust. I've been doing this for probably, close to 30 years. And you see people come and go because, they want things to happen fast, right? So he says, when the untutored find an old pattern showing up from time to time, they're likely to abandon their effort in disgust. In the science of mind, however, we know that this is neither disastrous and it's not final, for our power flows to the focus of our attention. To help the student understand what we mean by the focus of attention, he's wanting to give a concrete example. He says, the student may illustrate this by standing in front of your door and looking steady at it. And then look at the house number directly across your street. Focus on the number. You will see the number distinctly because your eyes are focusing and your attention is on it. But as you look at it without moving your eyes, you will also start to become conscious of things either side of this number. These things become increasingly vague because they're more or less to the right or left of the house number, which is the focal point of your attention. He said, we shall now move to the world of thought. People have what we call central consciousness, and we have marginal consciousness the same way we have central vision and marginal vision. So it's like I can be focused on what I want to see. And there's a lot of other things that are, around that I also am aware of. In our central consciousness, the things that we're most vividly aware of and we're thinking of are right there in front of us. And in our marginal consciousness are the things which we are dimly aware. It's almost like, peripheral vision. So he's got a chart which I can't blow up tonight, but I will try to create it for you next week. I can explain it. The law of attraction is that activity of mind that draws us that which is like our dominant inner thought pattern. Our dominant inner pattern of thought determines the atmosphere. So if you tend to be really positive, that's going to be the atmosphere. If your dominant pattern is fear, that determines your outer pattern also. So I know some of you are going through a lot right now because some of you call me, and we've got to shift those dominant patterns away from fear and more towards faith. We all carry our thought atmosphere. I can almost sense it when I meet a new person. Either they have a sense of, they're relaxed and they're exuding some positivity, or sometimes you encounter somebody, they're really constricted and they're dealing with a lot. And you don't know what they're dealing with, but they're dealing with a lot. So we all carry our own thought atmosphere, which is the image of our thought, which people tend to sense no matter what we say. Our thought atmosphere determines their responses to us. See, if you encounter somebody who's all tense and they seem unhappy, you'll approach them in a different way. You don't necessarily know what it is. Our dominant inner pattern of thought becomes our dominant outer pattern of experience. Mr. Bales says we attract what we love. We attract also what we hate. We attract what we fear and expect and what we steadily contemplate. So, here's something to do. If you're going through some pretty awful experience, it'd be good to ask Jimmy to send you something like Raymond Charles Barker's got a prayer of protection, and it's a really good treatment because it's really just to build up your consciousness. By the same token, we're asking you to remember your successes tonight. Remember every good thing that's ever been told to you about yourself. That's a way for you to build up that dominant inner pattern, especially if you're going through a tough time. So our dominant inner pattern of thought becomes our dominant outer pattern. So if you're going through a rough time right now, and there's always a few people on every call that are, I would ask you to get a hold of the center, get a hold of Jimmy, ask for that Barker treatment, or if you want to speak with me for a bit, you can, because that's good. That'll be what we'll want to support you in, is you building up that dominant inner pattern so it's more positive, because it's shaping your life. Our outer world is our inner world objectified. I'll say that again. Our outer world of experience is our inner world objectified. So it looks permanent, it looks scary, sometimes it looks awful, but it doesn't have to stay that way. And that whole reflection, say if you're messed up on the inside with all these thoughts, that's not a permanent state. You have power that you can use. That was Ernest Holmes. But you got to start using it. You got to take a stand for yourself and say, hey, I deserve more. I release the need for this miserable experience. I bless everybody. I love them all. And they're all doing the best they can with what they have. I bless them, I release them, and you hold them harmless. And really, you don't want to be part of any of that negativity. So these are some things that you can do. I've got to find a way to stop here, and I'll pick it up next week. But I'm going to close with something from Emerson. Emerson said that we pass for what we are. He said it more in an older way. We pass for what we are. If you can imagine people communicate their virtues and their vices. He thought by their actions, right? And they do not see that their virtue or vice emits what he called a breath at every moment. Emerson had a famous line, I forget which essay it was. You've heard it said in different ways, I'm sure. He said, what you are stands over you for a while, and thunders or speaks so that I cannot hear what you say to the contrary. You've probably heard it say, what you say speaks, no. What you say speaks so loudly I cannot hear, no, well, I can't remember how that goes. Judith will know what it is. Who you are is announced in the world, more so than any of the words you say. That's essentially the line before it. What you do speaks so loudly, I cannot hear a word that you say, is the way you hear people explain it today. And he's going back to the idea that people pass for what they are. By selecting, Emerson said, new spools of thought, we can change our dominant inner pattern of thought. And thus, our thought atmosphere is changed. So if we start selecting new spools of thought, we begin to change the dominant inner pattern of thought. And again, our thought atmosphere and our dominant outer pattern of experience. The law of attraction is scrupulously fair, just like a mirror. So what you think into it, it's going to start to shape. One more piece. The law of attraction. We tend to attract that which we love, that which we fear, and steadily expect. Regarding the law of attraction, again, that is the things that we keep in the front and the central part of our focus of our consciousness. Not all the scattered thoughts, but you remember yet it's focusing on the number across the street. Whatever you're focused on, we have a tendency, the things that we keep front and central in our consciousness, we fear certain negative experiences, and quite logically, then we attract them. But the student who has made his or her mind up that from now on, right here, this night, this class, I'm going to definitely love, I'm going to love myself, and I'm going to put my focus on the positive. We're going to draw in other words, put your focus on the positive, have that be your central thing, and things will start to change. There will come a time very soon when the negative will edge toward the center. When the negative will edge out of the center. And when things creep in, you're going to immediately say, I release this, and you will deal with it, you'll neutralize it. Gradually, we're going to notice that the good more and more tends to stay in the center of our focus. Our mind is of the one mind of the universe. There is a good reason why the power will flow to wherever we have the focus of our attention. So in this class, in this teaching, we're always going to be focusing on the power that you have and that you are one with the power. Our mind is not something separate. It is part of the one intelligence which formed and sustains the universe. Our brain structure is the best on earth, far surpassing that of any other creature. Yet it has certain limitations. While our mind is historical in that it can look backward and recall the past, it's not prophetic. So we have the power in the here and now to create a whole new reality. And there is an infinite knower within you, and you can commune with it, and it will inform you and guide you if you let it.